the Puranas, actually, I see that actually many of the Indic researchers now quote Puranas extensively for various things, especially in astronomy and things like that. But the question is actually now, where did we actually lose the ability to understand this
body type does this person have based upon genetics? Yes, we can. It is not as if that is modern. I will not use it in Ayurveda. Ayurveda is not frozen in time. So we continue to use the body of knowledge going forward. We see that this body of knowledge has not been supported by the British government. And even in India, it's only after that Ayush board was set up, we are seeing some amount of support towards traditional medicines. The central question is to question the hypocrisy. Why should the conflict model be the only model used to study Indian social dynamics? That is the only question you ask. Only question you ask. Why should everything be put in oppress? Is that the correct way of looking at it? If you can address that, everything else will fall in place. So this is the fundamental.
Lakshmi Madam, you can go ahead.
Namaskaram, everybody. Namaskaram, Raji. Thank you so much. It was such an informative talk. The problem, what I see now with the Hindus, when you mention Hindu identity, is we have gone so far away from the core concept of Sanatana. In fact, Hindu itself is a word which has been borrowed from outside. So my request to you, actually it's a request, it's not even a question, is can you please come out with small pamphlets of, literature, which will be available for a common man to just have who has this crisis of identity as to who we are. Just very small, because the way how I look at it, we push our children to study maths and science, but never the core concepts of Sanatana, because that's a very huge area. What are the different Upanishads? What are the different, Shastras involved? And nobody has time to read that. So when we go and tell our friends, you should listen to this, you should listen, it will take time. Instead of that, he has to do this tuition. This is a common thing what we go through. So this is a societal problem. So what is the solution for this? How do you suggest we tackle this? Thank you.
Excellent question. And it is obviously something that is on the minds of millions of Hindu parents and millions of people who are worried about where things are going. So there are books. Yes, we'll be glad to continue doing this, but there are already several people who have talked about this. I recommend that everybody watch a set of videos by Deepa Bhaskaran Salem. Deepa Bhaskaran Salem, search for her name on YouTube. And one particular video that comes to mind is how to teach Vedanta to children. Teaching Vedanta to children. So she makes a wonderful case where she says, this is the contemporary world that we live in. These are the pressures that are there on our children. So how do you present Vedanta from a very early age, from elementary age through teenage age, through young youth, and so on? What are the messages that we want to give? Now, Deepa lives in Chicago, so clearly her message is meant towards the youth who are exposed to very, very cosmopolitan life. And how do you even bring this message? I love the talk. So please see that. Again, her name is Deepa Bhaskaran Salem. So she presents how at elementary age, what are the kind of topics in Vedanta you can present? How do you present it? At the teenage level, what are the topics you present? How do you present it? So one backstory to that is the parents must know about these topics before you can teach the children. So the parents must first detox their minds and then try to present these topics. And there's enormous amount of work out there. Take a look at the lectures by Swami Chinmayananda. Take a look at the lectures by Swami Dayananda Saraswati, and so many resources are available. So we'll have to do that. In fact, there's curriculum in Balvihar available from Arshad Vidya Gurukulam with Chinmaya Mission. And so take these works, authentic works, and you can try to first learn by yourself and then teach your children. We have to make the time. There is no two ways about it. There's no two ways about it that I'm on the rat race over here. I've hooked my kid to the rat race. So as soon as he comes home, tuition class, dance class, and tennis class, and the karate class, there's no two ways. We have to make time at the very brief level, some nitya karmas you try to have in your own house. Maybe these practices every day connect us to our traditions and our roots. Very small things like a puja, a stotram. In the morning when you arrive, when you wake up, have the bath and then go do a namaskaram to the deities in your puja room, and then do an arati, and you do, and small, very, very small things that as parents we can adopt. The practicing of festivals. Very many of us, we work in the corporate world when we don't have holidays on some of our festivals. This is very true outside India, right? For example, in the US, we don't have holidays on Diwali or Holi and things like that. So we need to figure out ways that we can practice these festivals at home and connect our children with that. So bottom line, very good question. There are resources available. So please do take a look at the works from Chinmaya Mission. Take a look at the works from Arsha Vidya Gurukulam, and take a look at this author I talked to you about, Deepa Bhaskaran Salem. Take a look at her works. Indica Academy also does a lot of good works over here. Take a look at that. And the people who are advanced seekers of knowledge, please do go to Hindu University of America, where I'm offering 2 courses. But my co-faculty, more than 70 to 80 of them are there, who are leaders in their own rights in the kind of topics they address. They are allowing anybody, anywhere in the world to take these courses and learn. So if you have a desire to learn, please enroll in the University of America and take some of their courses and upgrade your own knowledge. And maybe we can have a better learning experience for our children.
Lakshmi ma'am, any follow-up?
Yeah, I think probably I agree with whatever you have said. And let me give you an example what I went through. So when of course, I am a late bloomer with the concept of Hinduism. And, I wanted to teach it to my kids because they started asking questions. So that's where I actually started learning and teaching them. Of course, Nitya Karmas we used to do right from childhood because that has been taught. I'm a classic case of a Hindu parent, and I'm telling you what the problem is. So we do this Satyanarayana Puja, and I used to give, why am I Hindu? There is a book, not Shashi Tharoor's book. There is an original book, actually. And I used to give that as a gift after the Satyanarayana Puja to people. After 1 year, I asked them, how many of you read that? Nobody. Then next year, I gave Kindle Life. Nobody has read that. Kindle Life is classic book, okay, of Swami Chinmayananda. Nobody has read that. So I understood. The problem with them is when you guide them to read a book or read, watch a video, which is purely on Sanatana, they don't find a value in it because they feel that, how is it going to help me in getting admission? How is it going to help me in getting money? That materialistic point has crept in so much into Hindu society that we don't give importance. We do everything. We do puja, this, that, everything. And I'm telling you this from my example, where I have actually literally done this and I have been disappointed. So I was thinking, if, since you mentioned now about caste, you mentioned specifically where it is coming from, a small booklet on that. You mentioned specifically on Nitya Karmas, a small booklet on that. If such type of publications get available from any publishing centers, where the reading is only like 5 pages, 10 pages, but gives you maximum information, probably people will change. And people like me who do this type of pujas have to give, Navratri setups or some things like that, where we give out things. We can give out these things, hoping that at least 5 pages they will have time to read it. That is my point. Because I understand what you mentioned, everything. This is something which I'm seeing in the society. Unfortunately, only in the Hindu society, it is so bad, not anywhere else. And whatever you try to do, that cohesive collective thought that I am a Sanatani and I need to, have this concept raised for my next generations to survive so that they don't go offbeat, is something very, very threatening to Hindu civilization. And nobody seems to understand that. Thank you.
Right. I agree. Very important points that you brought up. And again, reflection of how our society has evolved since 1947 through the British and prior to that, the Islamic situation. So our knowledge base on who we are as Hindus has been completely cut off from us ever since the English Education Act came in 1835, when funding to Sanskrit and Arabic, Persian, everything was removed. All money was diverted only towards English education. They created deracination. They created these elite classes who look down upon the vernacular people. That happens even today. Even today in India and elsewhere, if you know English, they think that it is something advanced, and people who speak in vernacular are somebody who are below. So this kind of nonsense happens even today. So this deracination has meant that the so-called notions of progress, modernity is only available in the West. So we look up to the West for everything. So they are the ones who subconsciously, Indians look for approval for the practices. And the West has already said that all of Hinduism is backward, primitive, superstitious. All the negatives have been associated with it. So nobody wants to identify with this. So I have found, for example, the formula to present anything on the Sanatan Dharma, the history and others, has been to use Vaisheshika, perception and inference. Let me explain. Before I started giving talks the way that I'm giving talks, I did not have a winning formula. The winning formula came when I gave a talk at a person's party, and this person said that my guests at the party are all westernized Hindus, highly westernized Hindus, and they will not accept anything that you say. So I decided to talk to them only on science, that science says this, and this is the relationship to our Indian history. So when I gave this talk, it had such an enormous impact on these deracinated people that I knew this is the winning formula. This is the formula to get to the youth, to the westernized youth, to the deracinated and others. As a scientist, talk science, talk about the relevance of these notions to our modern thinking. There is a tendency to take Sanatan Dharma as archaic, primitive, backward, superstitious. Where did we hear this? This is coming through the missionary perspective. This is coming through the socialist perspective, Marxist perspective. They want to destroy the old order to get a classless utopia. So they are not going to promote it. Whether it is in NCRT, whether it is in the government policies, constitution, everything is geared towards stifling and killing of Hinduism. That is what we are seeing today, right? So we know that, we understand that. So we also can try to see some truths in the way our ancestors lived their life, and we need to make that more and more clear. So my journey has been to introduce perception and inference, trying to see that through Pratyaksha, Anumana, we can build scientific knowledge. Through that scientific knowledge, we can have evidence-based investigation of the narrations on Hinduism, on the narrations on Sanatan Dharma, on the narrations on Indian history, and say, here are all the problems. There is no way we can accept this. This is the place where evidence is going towards. And I found good uptake of what I say among many people. Same thing goes when we talk about the philosophy, Vedanta. Why is it relevant in our daily lives? Why is it that the kid today is so overwhelmed that you see depression in kids? You see suicide. There's so many suicides in kids these days. So many other issues, emotional problems, behavioral issues, and other such things. Where do they come from? They come from two places. One is the lack of social mooring, moral mooring in Sanatan Dharma Vedanta. That is one. And other one is this race to always get ahead because the future is so uncertain. And it's becoming uncertain by the day. With AI technologies and so on, so many traditional jobs are going to be passé tomorrow. They're not going to be there. Simply not going to be there. The pressure on our youth is enormous. How do you use these technologies to see earlier? I'm sorry, I'm diverging a lot. When I did my PhD, when a master's actually in IISc in Bangalore, I asked my professor who had done his PhD much earlier, how did you do your PhD before there were Xerox machines? Today, I can go to the IISc library and I can take a journal, take a photocopy and read it in my hostel room. How did you do it? He said, Raj, in those days, we would take a tracing paper, we'll go to the library, we'll put the tracing paper on the graph and we'll carefully get the data from that and we'll write down, make notes. That's how we did our PhD. So the pace of life changed from then to the time I was doing my master's and PhD. When I was doing my PhD, the internet had just come. Now I see PhD students who are able to get journals from anywhere, papers from anywhere, reports from anywhere. I was constrained by geography and I couldn't get that. So the pace of research changed in the 2000s and to the present time. So this way, each technology has meant you run faster and faster. With AI now, people are saying all jobs will be AI infused. AI infused meaning that you will run so much faster just to be where you are. So which means the stresses are going to be enormously high going into the future. How can Vedanta address that? How can Vedanta and the practices in Vedanta help in calming the mind? How can we understand that we are more than the body? We are not just the body. Everything we are doing is not just for pleasure, not just for let me live my life, one life to live, and I'm going to enjoy it, and that is it. How do we instruct our children scientifically that, for example, who is this I? Who is this I? Even when we are born, from the time we are born to the time we become old, our body is changing so much. For example, biologically, we are changing. Our face structure is changing, bone structure is changing. Even the cells are regenerating. I think there's an estimate that once in 15 days or so, or maybe 1 month, all the cells in our body are replaced. So when everything materially is changing, who continues to be this I? Is it just the memories that we have? Who is this I? Who is this I who's the experiencer? So let's bring in science over here. Let's bring in science and talk to them about who this notion of I is. Who is this I who's experiencing stress? Who is this I who feels he's got to commit suicide? Who is this I who's emotionally broken because his lover left him? And all of these kind of things. How do we do these things? So we can bring in science. We can explain consciousness. One person that comes to mind when I say this is Professor Subha. Please read Subha's works on Vedanta and consciousness. He's talked a lot about this. He's got writings, books, papers, as well as videos. So please do take a look at his works also. So they help us in getting a scientific mooring for Vedanta. Tell them that Vedanta calms the mind, understands who we are, understands that we are more than the body, we are also the mind, and understands that mind requires nourishment also, and mind works in this particular way. Through dhyana, through concentration, dharana, and others, we are able to better focus on what is relevant and make that happen. Learning our dharmic practices, we're able to leverage how we live life, rather than at any given minute, oh, I'm on Twitter now, I'm on Instagram now, I'm on Facebook now, I'm here, there. So the mind is flitting. Boo, 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 boo. Every second is going there to there, wants to be entertained. Every minute want to be entertained, because that's all concept of life is today. The fear of losing, or FOMO, and things of that nature, right? Our kids are so engrossed in these things today that they constantly have to be on social media, constantly have to understand what is going on, the latest trends. Otherwise, they are left behind. They look small, self-esteem. Vedanta helps to get a grasp on all these things. Please see these talks I said by Deepa Bhaskaran Salem. That will help to put these things in perspective. But Lakshmiji, I understand everything you said, and the importance of writing books and small topics on this. Thank you so much for focusing on that.
Thank you so much.
The next questioner is Naren. Naren, go ahead.
Thank you. Namaskar, Vedam ji. Thank you for your presentation. My question is, the people who want to de-rationize Hinduism or Sanatana Dharma, they always put the identity in question in all the fronts. Everybody, starting from historians who say the term Hindu means just a geographical location, to people like Shashi Tharoor that say anything goes Hinduism, because India has always been a mixed bag of many cultures that invaded us. So if somebody comes to us and asks, can you please define what is Hinduism? Is atheist a Hindu? Or is anybody who would like to identify as a patriot or nationalist can be called a Hindu? Or should we come up with Sanatana Dharma, or we are Sanatanis, as a new identity instead of using the term Hindu? Thank you.
So, Narenji, good question. Very good question. So, if you've seen my talks, if you're not, please search for my name, Raj Vedam, on YouTube and see some of my talks. I address these topics extensively. So, one line statement to what you asked. What is the identity of Hindus, who we are? I already talked about it in the talk, but thank you for the opportunity to say it again. So, one line statement on who a Hindu is. Hindus are seekers. We are seekers of the truth. In contrast to Abrahamics, who are believers, they believe in something, in dogma. So there is no, they make truth claims, but they have no way to validate those truth claims, because if they question that truth, it is blasphemy. So anybody who challenges you on these things, point this out to them, that they are believers in a belief system that cannot be validated or questioned because of blasphemy issues or other such things, or there's no way to validate some of those claims, and we know that it does not gel with science. Whereas Hindus are seekers. Just that one line is enough for you now to bring in everything, Vedanta and everything coming into this, practices, beliefs, everything comes into this one line. Hindus are seekers. Seekers of what? Seekers of truth. Our goal in life is to dispel avidya. Avidya about who we are, what we are. Are we just this body, or are we more than the body? Understanding that we are part of the cosmos. Hinduism believes that Advaita, when we talk about Advaita now, that everything is Brahman. Everything is a manifestation of Brahman. That is expressed and non-expressed, abstract and non-abstract. Everything is Brahman in the cosmos, whether it is matter or energy, or even beyond that, and everything is empty space, everything is Brahman. So there is no separation between the so-called creator and the creation. So we are one. Whereas in Abrahamic thought, the creator is not in this dimension, and this is his creation. And the separator between creator and creation. The creator talks to the creation using prophets or saviors, who come and they tell you what mankind must do. Your goal in life is only to follow the divine dictated law in Abrahamic thought. You see what I'm saying? You're a sheep and you follow the shepherd. That is your only goal in life in Abrahamic systems. You should not question, like I said, because they say Satan is tempting you with these questions, and that is blasphemy. You should not do that. So you just follow the law. You just believe that, for example, somebody died on the cross for your sins. If you do, the only way to the Father is through the Son, you will go to heaven. Otherwise, eternal damnation. Or you believe that somebody is the last prophet and he brought the final word, otherwise, you, by the mercy of that entity, you will go to heaven, Jannat, or you'll be forever in burning in hell. So this is the only way they can see the goal of life. Your one-liner is, the Hindu is a seeker, dispelling avidya about our existence. How do we dispel avidya? By gaining knowledge. You cannot gain knowledge by being untrue to yourself. I cannot pretend doing an experiment that, oh, the answer is actually that, when really the answer was something else. I cannot do that. How can I pursue truth by being dishonest with myself? So Hindu by nature should be a seeker, a scientist seeking the truth. That is what we're doing. And every aspect of Hindu or Sanatan Dharma practices, dharmic thoughts, dharmic ideas, Vedantas, fits in beautifully with scientific ways of doing things. And I am saying that as a scientist, whether it is to do with the goal in life, whether it's to do with the karmic philosophies, whether it's got to do with consciousness, whether it's got to do with quantum ideas, everything is fitting perfectly with what our ancestors have talked about in Vedanta. Our rishis were not fools. They've gone through years of intense thinking about these great problems of humanity and expressed it in certain ways. And we are only now beginning to have a glimpse of some of that wisdom. So far, we have been pushing them as superstitious nonsense, but then we are understanding more and more what these things mean. So one-liner, the goal of life, that is where you should pose a question. The goal of life for Hindus is that everything is Brahman, because there's no separation between creator and creation. There is no distinction over there. However, in the Hindu way of life, we think that our attachment to the world of objects, emotions, and thoughts our attachment to the world of objects, emotions, and thoughts. That gives ahamkara, our ego, that I am this person, I am a PhD, I am a rich person, I drive an Audi car and all those things, and you are somebody else and so on. So the separation comes over there. This is avidya. This is the ignorance. Every aspect of Vedanta asks us to withdraw from these things and understand this is impermanent, this is not real, there's another reality over there. So this is the bottom line. This is the end. In the other system, like I said, separation. Here, no separation. Our goal is to understand the union, Brahman. That is our goal in life. It's a big answer, but you really have a one-line punchline. Only one punchline here. Dispel avidya. That is what our goal is.
Exactly, Naren, exactly. The question is beautifully answered. It was a good thing. Actually, you had actually the opportunity to stress those points actually again.
Yes.
Okay, I'll go to the next questioner. Hari Tulasidas.
Thank you, Dr. Vedam ji, for this. I could only join in the last part of your speech. So whatever I heard, it was very, very beautifully have placed the whole issue that is faced by the Hindu society today. It is not just the Hindu society which is facing this problem of a false identity, a false history that has been made by the colonial forces. You said about colonialization in the last part. The sciences, the historical science, the science itself, anthropology has been contaminated by some of these missionary thoughts which originated in the 17th and 18th century. I have seen a lot of your videos in YouTube where you have talked about the Aryan invasion or migration theory. You have talked about the caste, Varna issue and many other issues. So one of those issues which is deeply ingrained in the sciences, scientific thinking, is this migration hypothesis that a small group of people somewhere near the Ukraine-Russian border has gone all over the world and given culture everywhere, which is a notion that has come out of biblical exegesis, interpreting Bible in a particular way during the after the Middle Ages, when Europe was having a resurrection, where Reformation happened, and the Reformed churches took a very linear reading of Bible, and they thought that the history of humankind is what is mentioned in the Bible. So the Bible is history, Bible is science, and the notion of this migration theory comes from that. Similarly, it is the root of our caste theory, which we follow. Learned scholars in India follow that, which is coming from this source of Reformed Christianity, bringing in a narrative that is borrowed from their biblical understanding. So, taking these notions out of the sciences, the history itself is a big task. How do we think we can? I don't think any university or any scholarly institution in India is pursuing this goal seriously of seeing how colonialization has tampered with our history and also the sciences. How do you think this could be set up right? How that historical mistakes could be purged from both history and sciences? I would like to know your views. Thank you.
So I have already, everything that you said, yes, I have addressed it in my talks. So people who are interested in these topics, please do look for my talks on YouTube and see them. So yes, we have a big hurdle because I said there are some forces controlling the historiography of India. Among them, the modern ones are the socialists and the Marxists. They control the education sector even today in India. If you take a look at NCERT textbooks, and see the editorial page, just go to the opening pages, see who's the editorial committee, you'll recognize many of them are of Marxist thinking or socialist kind of thinking. So these are the people who are writing the history for our kids to learn. So until this framework is dismantled, we'll continue to have this. You as a logical person, by you, I mean rhetorically, everybody listening to this must ask this one question. Why should the conflict model be the only way of looking at the Indian civilization? I'll repeat. Why should the conflict model, oppressor-oppressed conflict model, why should that be the only way of looking at everything in the Indian civilization? Is there a different way of studying the Indian civilization? If anybody can honestly answer this, that will open other doors. That will open the doors to the Indic practitioner, the Sanskrit scholar, the Tamil Malayalam scholars, who are able to take their historical works and present it in the form they have historically understood. That kind of thinking will come about and that scholarship can be revived. That is not happening today because nobody has questioned them. Nobody's asked their adhikara to take over every Vedic literature and interpret them the way they want in the conflict dynamics and see every social behavior in India as conflict, oppressor-oppressed. Nobody's questioned them. This ideology I've shown to you has come through socialist thinking and Marxist thinking. And the missionaries did that in order to alienate Southern Indians from Vedic culture and convert them. So they started this division, but then it was gleefully upheld by the socialists and the Marxists. How do you challenge that? So today, though you have a so-called BJP government in power, they have not dismantled this yet. The new education policy has come about with freedom to present as you like in certain grades, saying that bring about this Indic thinking over here and so on. But beyond guidelines, I don't think this got teeth. So there are a whole lot of people who are writing books and so on, but I'm not sure which of these books will be adopted and by whom. So it'll continue to be this mess unless somebody at the level of pedagogy says, we have a big problem at NCRT. We have a big problem at many of these universities. We are only admitting one epistemology. That epistemology, or the way of looking at knowledge, is Marxist and socialist. If somebody has got the courage and the wisdom to articulate this well enough and convince the people in power that you need, as a university, as thinkers, we need a variety of viewpoints, the way it should be done. So this is but a small aspect of subaltern way of looking at Indian social dynamics. There are big aspirational models whose stories are not told. Those stories have been told in matams. Those have been told in Sanskrit colleges and a few isolated islands of excellence with zero impact on the rest of the diaspora. So you'll have to figure out a political solution to this so that you elect the correct people and hold them accountable. Hold them accountable to this. Make sure people understand. If you understand what I'm saying and other intellectuals understand what I'm saying, build on this theme. The central question is to question the hypocrisy. Why should the conflict model be the only model used to study Indian social dynamics? That is the only question you ask. Only question you ask. Why should everything be put in oppressor-oppress? Is that the correct way of looking at it? If you can address that, everything else will fall in place. So this is the fundamental notion that you must bring to show that their thinking is flawed and show that this is the only way doing. So please pursue that line of thinking.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Raji. Rajeshri, you can ask your question.
Okay, thank you. Namaste, Rajvedan sir, and everyone else here.
Namaste.
So, very wonderful talk. I have been, though I can't be listening to you full time, I listened to you and watched, and it was very much enlightening. And I am an Ayurvedic physician, so my question is related to that. Whenever I speak high on Ayurveda in many social platforms, the usual question is, okay, with all your science and everything, but still the life expectancy in 1800 or so is 25 years or 25 years, and mortality rate is just high. So is that a colonial construction, Or is there anything real to that, or what are the other reasons for it? In spite of that we have a very advanced modern or medical science, and it is said that only by modern medicine life expectancy increased, and these kind of pseudoscience didn't work. So that's my question.
Good question. Very good question. So whenever
In general,
yes.
in general, I have heard this. I'm adding to what Rajashree had mentioned.
Mm-hmm.
In general, like people used to say that Ayurveda is actually a pseudoscience and it is not effective enough, that it didn't work in the past. It didn't actually give people actually the proper health and life expectancy and everything like she mentioned. But only because of modern medicine, the people have got better, expectancy got improved, and so health standards have improved and all. I just made it actually a bit clearer than Rajashree mentioned, with Rajashree's permission. Go ahead, sir.
So thank you for that question, Rajashree. So whenever we face a challenge to any of the notions that we have, we need to question the sources. When somebody gives you statistics of life expectancy, 25 years, and so on and so forth, you must question that. You must question that in the context of the history in which that data point was taken. So if they claim that this is the life expectancy, one has got to see what are the factors. We know that during British rule, 300 years, more than 80 million Indians have died of hunger, starvation, famine. Because this is British induced entirely. My talks talk all about these things, which means malnutrition was endemic during this time frame, which means infant mortality, maternal mortality, mental retardation, many other issues arise because of lack of these things. Second, we know that throughout the Islamic period or the medieval period, not only in India, elsewhere, there were wars. Frequent wars where everybody is chopped down, killed, and these kind of things. So frequently we see disruptions to society in such a manner that even the statistics that you collect may not make much sense unless you embed them, understanding all the factors playing into that statistic. So if somebody says life expectancy was 25 years, our question is, did they live for 25 years and die of sort of disease or other such things? And the question would then go to, were they allowed to freely practice their knowledge systems and they understood they lived in a context where they practiced it? We have problems over there, right? So we have clear evidence from what I told about the story of Karkati, the disease transmission mechanisms. The observation that our rishis would have seen cyclical onset of epidemics in India. Every time monsoon comes, waterborne diseases, cholera, dysentery, TB, all these things will be there. So people would have seen these things. People have understood theories for that. Shushruta described 1,000 diseases, and he described methods to cure them, obviously surgery methods and all of these things. These clearly indicate an advanced understanding of the human condition and knowledge systems. This is what we are saying. This is the evidence. So given this evidence, is it possible that the mortality was still what people are saying it is? If it was, are there other factors for that? We have to understand. That's the first question, first aspect of looking at this. Second aspect of looking at this, in the word modern, what does the word modern mean? Where did it come? We had to understand that this word has come out of the European philosophical systems. The Europeans had initially the ancient Greek philosophies. When Greece was learning everything from India during the time of Socrates, Plato, Aristotle, their entire philosophical systems were from India, knowledge systems. They had an advanced knowledge at that time, mathematics and medicine and other things. But then when Constantine in the Roman Empire, he adopted Christianity in the year 330 current era. When he adopted Christianity, his successor, Theodosius, he was like a Taliban of today, right? So he destroyed all the so-called pagan temples, libraries, schools, people who practiced that. Everybody was killed in favor of only Christianity. So what we saw is promptly Europe fell into dark ages, because if you no longer have seeking truth as a goal of your civilization, but to obey as a goal of your civilization, then they fell into dark ages, disease, illiteracy, they had the plague, they had this, enormous numbers of problems in Europe for more than 1,000 years, from 300 current era, all the way to the so-called Renaissance, they had these problems. So in 1500s, By that time, if you see my talks, you'll understand better how did Europe come to even Renaissance? How did they learn to question authority? How did they learn to reject theology as a philosophical basis and go to rationality and logic? They learned that through Indian systems, which percolated via the Arabs into Spain, and translations of Sanskrit works into Arabic, into Latin. So through the 9th, 10th, 11th, 12th, 13th century, Europe was learning slowly under the yoke of the church about these things. So by the time it came to 1500s, we had people questioning these things. One example is Martin Luther, Reformation, you have Protestantism and other such things, questioning the authority of the church. Till then, church was primary authority. But then you also had people coming with rational outlooks. So you had Voltaire, you had a whole lot of other philosophers in the Western experience. And this notion of modern came about over there. Modern was seen as something where you no longer are obeying some old way of looking at things. There is technological advancement over there, a linear notion of time. The past is primitive, the present and future will be more and more advanced. This way of looking came about, this modern idea. But even in this modern notions, most of the ideas were still coming from colonies, European colonies. Native knowledge from India, from Africa, from Americas, elsewhere was taken into Europe, embedded into their own knowledge systems, and they were growing. For example, Ayurveda was taught in the medical colleges of British medical colleges in India, in Pondicherry, Chennai, Kolkata. They were teaching pharmaceutical methods were all Ayurvedic methods till 1880. After 1880, they digested most of this knowledge. And after that, they had discovered the the germ theory was understood, and they were trying to see topical drugs. So in the modern way of looking at things, again, by modern, I mean a philosophical way of looking at things, they can look at an entity as a part. They can take a part as it relates to the whole. So they can take, for example, just the eyes and study just the eyes, or just a throat and study just a throat. So you become an ENT specialist, you become an eye specialist, heart specialist, or things of this nature. So they take something in isolation, study it in depth, and they try to have a topical treatment only for that entity. So by doing that, very powerful ways obviously came about, along with other issues, right? So when you take just, let us say, some body part, let's say the heart, you just take the heart, study the heart, and you say that, yeah, there's a clog over here. So to do that, I'm going to give this drug, adrenaline, this I'm going to do, and such things, because I see that it's having a function. But in order to study in isolation, you have to take it out of the context. It lives in a body. So you say that I'm going to assume all these things are constant in the boundary, take this and study this in isolation. And because you're not sure how the body will behave, you have clinical trials. You have clinical trials where you try to apply it on many, many, many individuals. Then you see all the side effects, side reactions, and other such things. Statistically, you build some kind of picture. Then you say that, all right, I have given the placebo studies, I've given the actual studies, I've collected all this blind, double-blind data, and I've collected this. I got a bell curve now. Now I know that 500 mg of this drug 3 times a day will reduce infection by so much. So this is the way the modern science has progressed. It has brought about enormous benefits in many areas. There's no doubt at all about it. There's no doubt at all about it. But then you also have to see, what about the other way, the Ayurveda and other traditional ways? How have they been working? They have, already the Tridosha system. We've been working on that, Vata, Pitta, Kapha, and trying to see the human condition always seen in balance. It is in balance. In the Hindu system, it is in balance, not only with that, with also our karmas. What is our karma that we are coming to the table? Is some of the problems, medical problems that I have, is it because of poor diet, poor practices, or is it because of, let us say, some karma phala that I'm experiencing? It looks at it even in that way. But anyway, if an imbalance was seen, the human condition was tried to correct by trying to correct that imbalance. Over the centuries, our rishis have seen what are the treatments that correct a certain kind of imbalance. So that is what has allowed us to have treatments and options that allow us to correct imbalances. So we are seeing that holistically, the Ayurvedic way of treating the human condition has had overall impact that is beneficial, whereas the urgent topical treatment has seen more this allopathic way of trying to see a body problem and trying to understand within what limitations can I give some treatment that will make things happen. Now, the question of did this give the life expectancy, did that not give the life expectancy, that is a spurious question, because both of them are assisting life expectancy. If you did not follow Ayurvedic prescriptions and others, you might have died younger. So with that, you're obviously perhaps going to live longer, more healthily, able to live your potential better by doing those treatments. So clearly we're doing that. But do we have the statistics to say that lifespan is 25 in those days and now it has gone to 72 and 80 and other such things? What other factors could be going in over there? So those are all things that we are not studying. Next, empirically, only empirically, we can see that earlier generations were healthier. Newer generations are less healthy. If you go back to your grandfather's times and things like that, you might have seen that they actually in their youth, they would have been closer to the soil, closer to unprocessed foods and other such things, and perhaps healthier. Maybe they still had some cancers, which they did not know, but then they were healthier. Then even in our own times, you're seeing that in our youth, we managed much more. We have more energy to doing things. We are seeing in our children's generations that almost everybody's got some problem or the other. It is not because of improved diagnosis that we're able to say these kind of things, but we are actually seeing the impact of processed foods and the lifestyles that we have is causing these kind of reduction in the health qualities. So the question comes again, when we say that life expectancy and other things, you have to see the quality of life in addition. What about the quality of life? What about other things? Will these indicators forever be going up or are they going down also? With COVID, we had life expectancy going down statistically in Americas because of what happened over there. So like this, things can be reset also. So the question is not something that I would admit. I would challenge the question, ask them about where did you get the data from, understand the context in which the data was got, understand what are the many factors impacting the collection of the data. So the cause and effect relationships, need to understand that so we can better explain it. So a simplistic explanation of Ayurveda did not contribute to life expectancy. Modern medicine contributes to life expectancy. That is a very facile statement. And you have to challenge those kind of statements based on best understandings of what that gives to the table, what this brings to the table, how both can help each other in doing some things. For example, today we are studying genetics, right? Genetics can talk about some congenital problems. You have a disposition towards a certain disease or you don't have, and so on. Can we understand from genetics about Prakriti? About the Prakriti in Ayurveda, what kind of body type does this person have based upon genetics? Yes, we can. It is not as if that is modern, I will not use it in Ayurveda. Ayurveda is not frozen in time. So we continue to use the body of knowledge going forward. We see that this body of knowledge has not been supported by the British government. And even in India, it is only after that Ayush board was set up, we are seeing some amount of support towards traditional medicines. Even then, I don't know how much support is given to Ayurveda. So we need our physicians to learn more about techniques, bring about and make sure that we have more and more modern things to Ayurveda. We are not frozen to Charaka's time, Bhagbata's time, and Shushruta's time. It's a continuing discipline. Need to see how it can progress further and further. I hope these thoughts can help you over there, Ajishwari.
Yeah, thank you so much. And if I may, I have one follow-up question, which is,
Sure.
Do we have any scriptural record or something in ancient India where we can say, from the scriptures or from this we can interpret that we have lived for so many years? Is there any scriptural reference that you can tell?
Well, there are, but this data is not in the form that you may want it. For example, the Puranas have got a chronology of the kings. So you can take the chronology of the kings and figure out their life expectancy looking at just the king's record. Some of those kings lived for 100 years, some of them 50 years, and so on. These are only the reigning of those kings. But you get an idea from that. You have accounts in some Upanishads and others, and they're referencing rishis, that this rishi lived for that much of time, and his son was that. He lived for this much of time, and his son was that. So you have these anecdotal records over there. Then one can look into the historical record itself. At least for the kings, we have historical record. How long did a certain king live? If he did not die in battle, just of old age. How old was he when he died? We can take a look at that. In our own historical record about the life of Gautama Buddha, he lived to be a grand old man, and he died by food poisoning, right? He ate infected food in it, but he was, if I'm not mistaken, in his 80s when he died. So we have got several anecdotal evidences like this, and it's up to you to collect these evidences and make sense out of it.
Okay. Thank you so much for that answer. Thank you.
Thank you.
Raji, actually, I have a few questions. Actually, I have 5 or 6 questions that came through the back channels, but I would just limit it to 2. And I see that actually now our time has exceeded a little bit, so you can make it as brief as possible. But I'm just taking the 2 relevant questions from it. The one is like Rajeshri was asking, like when India got independence, our literacy rate was 12%. When we say that actually we have actually such a vast knowledge actually we had, and we had so many schools and padashalas, and somewhere I read about actually we had about 137,000 padashalas across the country at some point. So what was our literacy rate back in the day? I know it fell down to 2% in 1837 or 1857, and but before the invasion and before the foreign rule and everything. Do we have any data in terms of what was our literacy rate in the country?
So Ravishankar ji, so these questions are all difficult in a sense that we had to question many of these things. When somebody says percentages, literacy rate, we had to question their definitions of these quantities. What is their definition of literacy rate? How did they collect the data? And what do they mean by that? Because you can always define a statistic that gives you what you want to show. So you can do that. So one has got to be careful in these things. So clearly from Dharampal's works, we are seeing that across Bengal and Tamil Nadu, just these 2 places where the British took the census, it is 137,000 pathshalas you're saying, is just these 2 places, not the rest of India. So every village which had a temple, which means every village had a temple, it also had a pathshala. And in that pathshala, the children of the village were taught. So you can think that literacy was quite high. So what is the meaning of literacy over here? Do they understand Ganita? They understand grammar. They understand Vyakarna. They understand how to use several things that they need. At least a little bit about itihasas, which is our notion of history and other such things. So children were obviously schooled in these things for some years. How many years? There are many people have studied these things. You can go and study their works. Some say that schooling was at least 6 years to 10 years. And some say that, yes, it continued on for some varnas for some more years. And if you had to go to higher institutions like Nalanda or Takshashila and others, then there was entrance exams to go over there. And you'll study for further few more years before you become an expert in a certain discipline, maybe the equivalent of a PhD or the equivalent of masters. So maybe our children who learned in village pathshalas and others, maybe they go on up to middle school or high school level. And if you had advanced studies, like, for example, for Brahmins and others on the Vedas and all the sutras and other such things, maybe they are up to the college level. And in Nalanda and other places where they learn deep disciplines, maybe it's up to PhD level. One can say these things because it's not easy to have a definition of what is literacy. So today in India, literacy can mean if you can sign your name, then you're literate. So would that level of literacy be enough? For example, the US, they say your reading must be up to the level of a 4th grader, 5th grader. Are you reading at that level for your age? So they try to peg the age to a reading level, to a mathematical level. And that is the way they try to see how effective things are being. These are standardized tests and so on. So when somebody says literacy level, you had to question that statistic. How do you define the statistic? How do you measure that? And so on. So my take on that briefly is that India was a very literate society for the longest time. Very, very literate society. Evidence is there in the high productivity of Indians, the richness of India by Angus Madison's works and others. That is the evidence that India is so productive. You can't be productive with an illiterate workforce. Even today, if you want to have a competitiveness in a company, you want to get the best people over there. Not only the thought leaders, but also the technicians, the mechanics, others. If the best in class, then you can make a quality product. Same thing in ancient India. So the fact that India was that productive tells me that it was a very, very literate society. And we know what has happened along the way. The British Education Act that caused a break in all of these things, starting with the Muslims. The Muslims had destroyed a lot of universities in ancient India, medieval India. Many universities were destroyed. They also prevented many of these traditional learnings in several places. Some places they were supported, some places they were prevented. We see all of those things. British continued that deceleration till a point of near zero. And we are there at the point of near zero on the Indian education systems. And we are ramped up on our current ways of looking at things.
Absolutely. The second question is coming up from the Puranas. Even in your recent talk that I heard, you had mentioned about Andromeda galaxy and how it is mentioned in the Puranas. It was mind-boggling. I mean, in the Puranas, when you read the story, actually, it doesn't make much of any sense. It probably will say that very absurd. But when you understand actually the logic behind it, it's absolutely mind-boggling. Andromeda galaxy and actually the stars that pointed as chariots and all those was amazing. The question is actually, the Puranas, actually, I see that actually many of the Indic researchers now quotes Puranas extensively for various things, especially in astronomy and things like that. But the question is actually where did we actually lose the ability to understand this properly? Because even among Hindus itself, people say that Puranas doesn't have anything. It's just absurd stories and doesn't make any sense. But people like you, the researchers and all, I am constantly seeing it is being quoted over and over. So what is your take on it?
Excellent question. So yes, so in many of my talks, I'm showing that Puranas contain wisdom in the form of metaphors. So these metaphors, what they do is they try to take some divinity. So divinity could be a representation of some force they want to show in that particular moral or story. They take that divinity, weave it into a story, and in that story, there is some wisdom being communicated. If you have the key to unlock the wisdom, then it becomes clear to you what they intend to say. And typically it is the gurus and others are the ones who give you that wisdom. Once you go and listen to that pravachans, that satsangs, then you suddenly learn that is what it means. And you understand the moral wisdom or the observation wisdom, other such things. If you don't have that benefit, then learning or the understanding stays the pedestrian level. It remains at the level of mythology. So there are people who are ignorant as hell, but they feel competent to go and give an opinion on that. So it really shows the extent of their ignorance, and they call it mythology, without understanding what wisdom their ancestors had wanted to communicate. Situation is like this. If I am a PhD engineer, I am a PhD engineer. So if I say I studied the stability of the Indian power grid, and I say that, all right, I have understood all the problems, mathematical models that defined huge, complicated, nonlinear differential equations, eigenvalues, all those kind of things. And I know where to be stable, where to be unstable. But if I want to communicate a recipe to the operator in the power station, because that is where some decision has to be taken, I cannot tell him all this mathematics. So I may reduce it down to a formula telling him that if the frequency goes up, you turn this knob. If the voltage goes down, turn that knob, and try to remain within this upper bound and lower bound. So I've converted that wisdom into a set of operations which the operator can happily do, and the system is stable. So the operator need not have a PhD to do that. He just follows the formula and things are working beautifully. So this is what we see in the Indian context repeatedly. Not everybody goes to Nalanda. Not everybody goes to Takshashila. Our rishis are enlightened people who understood so much, but the vast majority of people are ignorant, right? So we have a bell curve. You have the rishis falling off at the tail end. Most people they don't understand most of these things. How do you communicate knowledge to them? Our rishis knew our minds are craving entertainment all the time. That's why even now we want Facebook in 1 minute, Twitter another minute, then streaming on Netflix the other minute, and things of that nature. We want entertainment every time. So they brought about these entertaining stories. They put wisdom into that, and they knew they will last. These stories will last. So even today, in my TEDx talk, I told the story of Nakshatras, that Chandra married the 27 daughters of King Daksha, and that is an allegory for the nakshatras, the different stars that come at different times of the day. Where is the moon in relation to that? That's how Indians kept the passage of time. The stories of the nakshatras help us to identify them in the sky. If I tell the story of Shravana, for example, That Shravana, we know, was carrying his parents in a basket. And so if you see a star, you'll find there's one star over there, and below that, there are two small stars, looking like a person carrying a basket. So things of this nature. So there are stories that will help us to understand these nakshatras. This is the wisdom. If we know the key to unlock the wisdom, we understand it. Otherwise, pedestrian level. So repeatedly we see that. Then you asked, did we lose this wisdom? Yes, repeatedly India has seen invasions for thousands of years. Whenever invasions happened, the intellectuals were the ones killed. For example, during Islamic times, I think Khilji or earlier, or Ghazni, I'm not very sure who, they boasted that they collected so many of the sacred thread of Brahmins, so many were killed. You're saying how many camel loads are required to carry that string away? That is the number of Brahmins who were killed over there. Yeah. So many teachers are killed. Can you imagine if you go to a school in a village and kill off all the teachers? Who's going to teach those kids? How do you recover that knowledge? Painstakingly, somebody's going to reconstruct, but you lost something along the way. Then it becomes frozen in time, a shastra. We have done this historically. I don't know why we do it, but I saw my grandfather doing it, my great-grandfather doing it, so we are doing it. This is what our parents' generation was like. Parents and grandparents' generation. They did not know because they're already divorced from the reality of our existence. So this ignorance has been compounding over the generations till we come to the present time where we have enormous ignorance. Ignorance, the vacuum has been filled with distortion, where all these 5 agencies have distorted this whole thing. That is filled in our minds. We call it mythology. We call it nonsense. We don't go there. We say it's not reliable. All this because they have told us how to think. They programmed our minds. So our minds are working according to their programs, completely brainwashed and so on. So we need to understand. Through knowledge, we can reclaim this. Understanding Vedanta, core axioms. Axioms are where we start. Vedanta, this is what it has told us. Why did the Rishi do the story? What is the story trying to communicate? If we spend some time in sadhana and try to understand this, we will understand what is the metaphor there. That is what I'm doing. Every story that I'm decoding, this is exactly what I'm doing. Our ancestors are not idiots. They did not think that the moon was a man marrying so many women. No, they were as knowledgeable, much, much greater than you and I. So there is a reason why they did that. We had to uncover those reasons. So I hope that addresses your question, Ravishankarji.
Absolutely. And even the moon, actually, why Rohini became the favorite wife also. That was beautifully explained in one of your talks. Raji, actually, it's been a wonderful talk. And actually, we have been going through for about 2 hours and 20 minutes by now. I hope actually the questions were very relevant.
Yes, they were. They're very, very relevant, very intelligent questions. Yes.
Absolutely. And I'm not taking actually too much time. I have already taken actually now more time than actually we had anticipated. So it's actually, we are really grateful for you to be here with us and very enlightening talk. And we expect actually you to be here actually now for more topics actually in the future too. Thank you, Vedamji.
It's a real pleasure. Thank you for calling and the privilege of talking to your audience. So thank you very much, Ravishankarji. Thank you.
Thank you.